in various organizations, I hate it, okay? So I came back to this side and say, no, that's not the way to write it. This is the way to say it. This is the approach. And I enjoy doing that, not sitting in judgment, okay? So whatever I try to tell you is something I think is generally not fully understood. And that little understanding makes all the difference. Now remember, as a teacher, many students would ask me, how do you learn? And the only answer is this: you learn from simple ideas. And when you're thorough with simple ideas, you make more complex ideas. There are no shortcuts. If you're not sound in your simple ideas, all the way you go through, up to multiple logistic regression, you are a farce. You are talking nonsense because you haven't got the foundations right. And this is the problem with our science, because we prepare ourselves for exams. What test, what question will come? Good news, you have no tests. Okay, so you didn't even learn one bit, nobody will find out. That will be your secret, all right? Now, before I start, let's again get into this English language and get a few things right. Question 1 to you. What is the difference between a fact and theory? There are no extra charges, you can answer.
Theory is that is yet to be proved, and
theory yet to be proved, and
fact is that is already an established truth.
Yeah, that's one explanation. I mean, I asked this question because I hope to get different kind of. What about honey?
Facts are based on the evidences, and theory is more of the rational, logical.
Facts are actual things. Theories can be made up. That can be built. These are the actual things.
Theory can be?
It can form. Theory can be formed. Assumptions. Or the.
What is that word she used?
Built.
Built or formed. Built or formed.
Any other idea? Yeah.
Facts are based on experiments, and theories maybe without experiment, or it is only because.
See, all of your answers so far are correct. Okay, but each one has a different shade of correctness. That's the problem. That's why I put it out straight away. You want to say something? According to Oxford dictionary, I'm going to explain. Fact is something we all can observe, measure, feel, quantify, whatever. But we all agree on it. That's the advantage of fact. Usually, you show to something and everybody will agree on one fact. Yeah, it's fact. But theory is not that. Theory explains why the fact is so. There's a huge difference in what I'm saying and you to say, and you should appreciate it, because all our science is fundamentally based on these two concepts: fact and theory. Now let me explain a little further. Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Is it a fact? Will anybody doubt it? Absolutely. Then the questions come, hey, why the hell sun does it? Why does it do that? And then the explanation was, that is because the sun, the moon, and the stars are going around the earth. We are the center of the universe. That was the first theory. What a nice theory. Man is the center of the whole universe. That's fantastic. But then we had to give up the theory in favor of we are spinning on our own axis. And that's why the sun is doing so. Did the fact change? No. Did the theory change? Yep, by a whole lot. And if you look at science as a whole, you will notice facts haven't changed much ever since God created heaven and earth. But theories keep changing. Why so? Why so? And in pursuit of science is about the second question, the theory of why things happen so. All the p-values, significant tests, all are about facts. But that's hardly 10% of the work. The 90% of the work is figuring out why so. And that needs more than your research methodology. And the wisdom to do that is what we really call science. I'll teach you 2x2 tables and all these little tricks with which you can do, but the real thing is much more complex. And that is the wisdom you should seek, okay? And it's not easy. Now, you must forgive me, we have to do a little bit of mathematics along with it. I don't know how you guys are. Many of us, when we were young, we were told, if you're good in maths, become an engineer. If you're poor in maths, become a doctor. And I became a doctor, okay? Now, I don't think it's true, okay? Because doctors are the ones who use mathematics most. You know, you walk into a doctor's clinic, you are Mr. Kuppuswamy or whatever it is. By the time you come out, you're a series of numbers. You have a height, weight, blood pressure, urea, creatinine, cholesterol, name that. And you are a bundle of numbers. And doctors say, we are very poor in maths. Not so. But I want to ask you a question. Is maths an invention or a discovery? That is easy, right? Invention, discovery. How is this divided? Obviously, there is a controversy on everything under the sun. Okay? So you will have a problem. So I'm not here to sort that out. But I'll give you a little inkling on that. Now, let's get this some semantics correct. Columbus did not invent America. He discovered. So, if you say it is a discovery, you must say we are dealing with maths created by God, and we suddenly happen to discover it. We are dealing with divine mathematics. All right? That she doesn't want to admit. Anyway, well, that is the implication. So, many years ago, many years ago, more than 2,000 years ago, Egyptians tried to do a little mathematics. They took a circumference of a circle and divided it by the diameter. Do you know what answer they got? Circumference of a circle divided by the diameter.
22/7, but they used an approximation.
I don't know. They started calculating, so they measured and they divided by the. So what did they get? A circle, any circle you take, and divide by the diameter. What will you get?
Would be
Pi. Absolutely. And what is the value of pi? That is what he said. Unfortunately, it's an approximation. This 22/7 is an approximation. The 3.1, you know that number? I tell you some secret. That number never ends. It goes on and on and on to eternity. Embarrassing, right? And it's a perfect random number. We'll come to random numbers a little later. It's a perfect random number. Now they got a shock. They thought a simple arithmetic will provide a natural number, and you are not getting a natural number. I think God was having a good laugh up there. You think you have divine mathematics? It's human mathematics, I think, okay? We probably invented it. Okay. Invention of a 10-fingered animal. Who's saying it? J.P. Muliyil. Does it make it the truth? No way. You should challenge it, okay? But the point is, mathematics is an excellent language. In fact, that is a universal language we have now. That is the one good thing. And do you know what is India's contribution to this mathematics is? Excellent, 0. In fact, there are many scientists who believe that that 0 made all the difference in science. Because you need to have a tool to compute, and 0 made sure one important deficiency of the existing mathematics disappeared. Anyway, so we'll be indulging in a little mathematics also. But please remember, mathematics is not, in my opinion, absolute. There may be difficulties, and the way you use is all important. Now, when we start our course, I have a pathway, and I need to explain how I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask this question of how do we go about finding the truth? And the first step we take is to learn to quantify things. Quantification, the first step, is a way of thinking, I now understand the dimensions of this. And once you have known the dimensions of a particular thing, then you can ask the question, is there any way I made an error in my measurement? Does this thing vary over time? Does it stay put? And then, looking at the variations, you ask the question, what seems to be responsible for the variation? The whole concept of causality, everything, is built into the notion of whenever disease patterns move, we know there's something moving it, and it's easy to pick up something. When there is very low diabetes in India, and then suddenly diabetes become more common, and you ask, why? Who moved it? And that is the one trigger to ask, can I find the causal mechanism for many diseases? So this process of measuring frequencies and things like that is fundamental to science. Now, statistics is a branch that people are very scared of. In fact, that must be a joke, because statistics is one of the easiest subjects to understand. It is very easy to comprehend, and when you know that a little bit of statistics, not a whole lot, you suddenly feel very powerful. Oh, is that all there is to it? And that is the moment I hope you'll experience in the next 2 days, which is, and should watch out for it. Yeah, now I understand it. So the thing is, this is what my ambition is. We'll see how it goes. And anytime you have a problem with my communication, the way I'm saying is not correct, you should stop. Let me begin with a story. Okay? Many years ago, I got interested in leprosy. How many of you seen a leprosy patient? You haven't even seen? Wow. You have not seen leprosy? Okay, put your hand down. How many have touched a leprosy patient? Not bad. That's also a pretty good number. Yeah, because that was a stigmatizing disease. People wouldn't touch. Whole lot of problem. Now, don't complain. I used to work with leprosy, and all my whole lot. I had about 10,000 patients. One day, one little young boy I brought home because he had a problem. So the ward was pretty close to my home, not very far away. And this youngster began staying there. But one evening when I came home, he was playing with my 5-year-old son. And my heart missed a beat. That is stigma, okay? Everybody has some stigma on it. But this was a highly stigmatizing disease. And I wanted to find out how much leprosy was there in, because once you want to learn more about disease, you want to quantify. So on January 1st of one particular year, I started my survey of my population. There were 200,000 people living in my area, and I went to house, examining everybody for evidence of leprosy. And finally, I got the number. I had seen 200,000 people, and there were 4,000 cases of leprosy. All right? And I divided this by the denominator. Remember, this 4,000 is included in the 200,000. And I got the figure 0.02. What is that? You all know that. What is that 0.02? Prevalence of leprosy. Now, when did I finish the study? On 30th of December of that year. Question, can I now call it point prevalence? What should I call it? Okay. I'm grateful you answered me, so now I can say loudly, that's wrong. It is point prevalent. Now you should say, this fellow should not get away with this thing. He should explain why it is point prevalent. Remember, had I been a Superman, you know, the guy who wears underwear outside, I would have started the study on 9 o'clock on 1st January, and by 10 o'clock I would have finished the whole survey. But I was only JP, it took me 1 year. So you're saying, this is not point prevalence. If I had done it quickly, it would have been point prevalence. That is rather unfair, right? Who can do like a Superman? That means every survey will be a point repeated prevalence. There's something not fitting well. I claim this is a point prevalence because there is a point in time here. And what is the point in time? At the time of examination. See, I went from house to house to house to house. And each house I saw once and only once. All right? And that is why it's a point prevalent. Well, that is not convincing evidence. You need something else to support. Like common cold, comes and goes, comes and goes. Leprosy doesn't do that. Leprosy is a chronic disease, and it exists in a state of dynamic equilibrium. Can you remember the word? Dynamic equilibrium. What does that mean? New cases are forming, old cases are disappearing. It's a continuous process. At any given time you go like this, the way I did, you get a cross-section and a measurement, and that is a prevalence. What did I say? Dynamic equilibrium. New cases are continuously forming. That you can handle. Old cases are disappearing. Do they disappear? Does leprosy heal by itself? Does it most of the time. More than 85% of the cases of leprosy heal without treatment. Okay? That's the situation. There are many diseases like that. They come and then they go. And if we doctors can make money in the meantime, we'll make the money, okay? But very often we don't need to do anything. They'll go by themselves. So leprosy I specifically mentioned is a classical example of a disease in dynamic equilibrium. In some other diseases, they have an average duration and then they die. Leprosy people don't die. So it's a convenient example. Now, I had this prevalence, 0.02. And in fact, think carefully. Every point prevalence you calculate will range from 0 to 1. Epidemiology will be a very boring subject. For example, instead of leprosy, I was dealing with juvenile diabetes. You know what the prevalence should be? 0.000002. I'll be sitting in corner and muttering zeros all my life. Okay? Measurement is boring. Unless I'm Spartan enough to say, convert into multiplied by 100 and I get 2%. That is socially more acceptable. Nothing has changed. I put some powder on his face, gave a tie, he looks more decent. 2%. So never go around using this ugly term that mathematicians do. We guys, science people who relate to human beings, we say 2%. So I went to a German leprosy mission and asked for some money. I said, we have 2% of our population have leprosy. Can you give us money to do a leprosy program? This is a German leprosy foundation, so they're supposed to help. They were not impressed. So I was quite upset. So I went to the Belgians. This time I was a little cleverer. I converted into 20 per thousand. And I said, you know, we have 20 per thousand people with leprosy. Wow, is it? Yeah. I got the money. Had I not, next time I would have used 200 per 10,000. Common game we all play, okay? So you should be wise to it from the beginning. And we use it regularly in the market. On a funding agency, the way you put it across, that matters. But the thing is, some people say by converting like this, it becomes a rate, doesn't it? Prevalence is prevalence. It's a fraction. It's like a birthday cake. This is my birthday, this is a birthday cake, and that's my piece. That fraction of that is prevalent. Any questions? Prevalence is the easiest way of measuring disease frequency. What is the prevalence of diabetes in Pune, in this area, in your project area? Anybody? Dr. Yagnik won't be amused. How high is it? How low it is? No idea. Anyway, now, the interesting part is, in Vellore now, this prevalence has come down to 2 per 10,000. Okay? It sort of saw in my own eyes, in front of my eyes, could see it disappearing. That's as magical. Something could be done, were done, and it happened. So that is a challenge for a health professional. That is, when you start working on something, when you're able to make an impact, it's very satisfying. So I told you what is the point prevalence like. And I have a word called period prevalence. I'm not going to explain immediately, but instead I'll talk about incidence. You all know that? Incidence? Incidence is a phenomenon of new case formation. That's the best way to understand it. Incidence is a phenomenon of new case formation. So let us take a simple example. Here are 100 people who underwent a surgery for some cancer. I followed them up for 1 year. And at the end of 1 year, 60 people were still alive. That means 40 died during the year. The data comes to you and you are asked the question, what is the incidence of death? No problem. So we'll write, tell me the equation for incidence of death. (40 upon 100 is equal to 0.4, or our style of writing 40%. 40% is the incidence of death. This particular way of quantifying incidence is an approach called risk approach, or an approach called probability of death, risk of dying. This talks about 1 year risk of dying. Everybody knows this, right? There's no problem. But when you wrote this equation so casually, you have to remember there are certain assumptions we have taken already without talking about it. And these are important assumptions. Assumption number 1, none of the 100 were dead to start with. Can you remember that? None of the 100 were dead to start with. That is, if you are measuring incidence of disease X, the base population should not have anybody suffering from disease X. If you are looking for incidence of diabetes, nobody in the population should be having diabetes. Simple enough, but that is important to clarify now. Number 2, there should be a period of follow-up. If there is no period of follow-up, you can't measure incidence. Either directly followed up or an implied follow-up. There are ways we can do that. That is that. The third important assumption, none of the 100 were immortal. What does it mean? All the 100 were capable of getting the outcome. They could all die. Now that is also an important assumption. For example, I want to measure incidence of uterine cancer in a group. Whom will I choose? Women. All women, only women with uterus.
Women with uterus.
Yeah, it has to be people with uterus. So otherwise, there's no point doing a study of that kind. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you can later on adjust for things like that, but that is implied. So incidence calculations has this important underlying, very often is forgotten, and you won't believe how often it is done wrongly. Now this is the way generally we calculate incidence, and incidence is a phenomenon. I said incidence, and I used the risk approach to measure incidence. I have given notes for all this, so you will have, you just make down, don't take down extensively. But the problem is there is something funny about this particular equation. And see, for example, what is the probability that you may die? Correct answer, 100%. So if you wait long enough, if everybody's probability of dying will be 1. Now that makes the statistics rather boring, Epidemiology has no future. Why you measure something which you're sure of getting? All right. So people are a little more impatient. Listen, don't tell me what is the probability. Tell me how fast are people dying. It's the speed with which people are dying. Newton was interested of this kind of a thing. How fast is a plant growing? And he developed a whole mathematics called calculus. Okay? And the techniques, he is the only genius who could create a whole branch of mathematics so that you could study it thoroughly. Okay? So, we won't go into that because I don't understand calculus. I only understand simple things. So let us look at the whole concept of measuring incidence using rate. Rate of dying. That is probability of dying. I want to now measure incidence of disease as a rate. Now I take the same 100 people and I watch. What am I watching for? I'm watching for somebody to die. And suddenly one fellow falls down dead. Quickly I take my paper and I write death rate 1 out of 100 in time t. So I got a time dimension and one death in that time dimension. Brilliant, I made a good start. Now I continue to watch. Whom do I watch? Huh? Yeah, that message is very clear. Don't watch the dead guys. Okay, no point, right? So, I watch the dead guys. And then one more falls dead. 1 out of 99 time t dash. So on and so forth. I can measure any length of time. I can measure for 30 days, 60 days, doesn't matter how long. But in the meantime, I calculate death rate. I don't have to wait a whole year. I measure date, and now I got a rate. So let us do it. I can't go on doing this, so I'll just make it simple. I'm going to summarize my exercise. These 100 people, by the end of the year, only 60 were alive. Okay? That means 40 died somewhere during this period. 60, I could watch each one of them for 1 year. Each one contributed 1 year of observation time. 1 person year. So 60 into 1 is equal to 60 person years. What about the 40 who died? Unfortunately, I don't have the time of the death. I wish I had. I don't. So, this 40, I'm going to assume, I may be wrong, but please pardon me, it's for exercise sake, I'm going to assume they died evenly during the year. Some in January, some in February, some in March, some in November, some in December. Okay? Have you got in your mind? They are dying at the same speed across. If that be the case, on an average, each person would contribute. On an average, each person can contribute 6 months of observation time. Is it acceptable? Some will contribute 1 month only. Some will contribute 11 months. On an average, they'll contribute 6 months. So I got 40 into half is equal to 20% year. And That gives me 80 per year. So now I calculate my rate. 40 divided by 80 into 100 or 1000, whatever you want, is equal to 50 per 100 person years. These are two fundamental ways of measuring incidence. I did it using the same data set. In the first you got the probability of dying as 0.4 or 40%. The rate of dying is 50 per 100 person years. Two are different. Okay, you have to accept because we are doing it. In this first one, we use the starting population as a denominator. Here, we used a funny population, a person time. Does anybody know? You have done community health. When you tell them, how do you calculate India's crude death rate?
So at the midpoint of the so whoever is died at the midpoint, we take the immediate population.
Mid-year population. Ha! That is the notion I was trying to get across. Mid-year population. Because by mid-year, 20 would have died, 20 yet to die. In other words, in our national statistics, we use mid-year population as a denominator because it's a good surrogate for person time. What we calculate there is incidence rate, not risk of dying. So what should you understand at the end of this whole story? You got to remember one. Incidence can be a little tricky fellow. You can measure more than one ways. And fundamentally, I am presenting to you two methods, risk and rate. What are the difference? It's the difference not in the numerator, it's in the denominator, the way you calculate denominator. And in a little while, it will become apparent why the difference, why we calculate two differently from a practical point of view. But at the time being, you must know there are two methods of calculating incidence, and two give you different results. And one good news is the rate and probability, though available, are difficult to communicate in many ways. And I want to use that explanation now. Now, I'm going to give you some exercises, not physical, don't worry. Yes, it'll have some, I'll give you, there are some tables with you. Exercise number 2, 3, 4. Now, number 2 is a homework. 3 and 4 you should do now. 1 and 2 you do it as a homework. What is the incidence of diarrhea in the first year of life?
20.
It depends on 2.1 per. Some denominator we need, no? 2.1, no? That's what you're getting? Are you getting 2.1? 1 per what? Per 1,000. Does it make sense? We have a whole lot of diarrheas on the paper, I saw that. Okay. And then you come with 2.1 per 1,000. There's something wrong with the calculation. 2.1 2.1 per 200. Yeah, we are only talking about 1 year, first year. You look at the number of diarrhea. There are 200 children. Are there more than 200 diarrheas or less than 200 diarrhea? So that means per child there is more than one diarrhea.
It is 2.1 cases per child.
Each child, on an average, had 2.1 diarrhea. Bingo! You got it. You got it? When I write down 2.1, I'm going to make a statement. From my experience, I realize that group of children will, on an average, develop 2.1 episodes of diarrhea in a year. Now, this is a new kind of incidence. In the first one, we took a proportion and the death, and we call it risk. This one, we had number of children and said per child how many is more than one. Yeah, diarrhea, respiratory, all go more than one. Okay, so you have to be very careful what is your denominator, and every time you see the number, you got to learn to talk to the number. Okay, otherwise it has no meaning. So what is about the second year? 1.7, huh? 1 point. So I am going to write two numbers, 2.1 and 1.7. 1.3. I got two numbers. I am very grateful. Now I want you to read the third question carefully. I admitted I am not an English speaking person. I wrote it myself. I hope there is no ambiguity. What is the third question? So what is the answer?
3.4 episodes.
You have a doubt? So, let us sort it out, okay? First year, how many diarrheas were there? 425. Second year, how many diarrheas were there? 267. 267. I'm going to add them. 2. 690. Wow, that's a lot of diarrhea. The 200 children had managed. Now, if I were to divide this by 200 children, I would get 3.4. But then somebody can say, listen, each child contributed 2 years, right? So there are 400 child years. So shouldn't you be dividing by 400? Okay, but don't say no. This is a free country. So I'm going to divide with 400. And I'll get an answer 1.7. Now, which one is right? I've got two answers. Then I'll tell you the truth is both are right. Now that's nuts. But both mean same, two difference times duration is equal to prevalence. Is it correct? Sort of. Accurate? No. Usable? Yeah. finished, okay? But this is a simple equation, and now, can you next take the problem number 4 and glance at it and explain to me how you will do it? Copper T is a intrauterine contraceptive device. Okay, to do little arithmetic. Total number of women, how many are there?
15, 15.
Now quickly glance, how many pregnancies? Finish. 2 by 15, okay? Incidence of pregnancy, 2 by 15, right? Wrong. Why wrong? Problem. Following up for different period. Some women lost their copper T the day after they would put in, so no point. So just by 2 by 15 is unfair, unethical, illegal. Don't do that. So what do? Then you calculate a different denominator. Time exposed to copper T for the duration. So what you have to do is the 2 pregnancies occurred during so many months of wearing. You understood? Somebody who's quick at maths, just assign months and add up and tell me 2 by that months. Anybody with an answer? Well, it depends on whether you are using a Korean calculator or not, but a little bit of variation allowed. So,
282 months.
282, huh? What are you getting?
247.
That's more like it. 249 is accurate. So, anyway, don't worry. If you calculate, you will get something like, this is the important part, 8 per 1,000 women months. That's what you will get. If you patiently calculate, you'll get that. If you throw the calculator once down and pick it up, then it will work better. Okay? Now, point I want you to understand is, a lady comes to you and says, Doc, I want to put a copper T. You think it is safe? Oh yeah, it's safe. Will I become pregnant? Well, you may. What is the probability I'll become pregnant? Well, I don't know that, but the pregnancy rate is 8 per 1,000 women months. What the hell is that? 8 per 1,000 women months. She's one woman, okay? She's not 1,000 women. How do you explain this thing to them? This is the standard rate. Very ugly, in a clinical setup, useless. Okay? So, but don't despair. This can be done. This is useful because it's easy to calculate. The way we did it, there's no other way to calculate incident. The good news is you take that rate and you can convert into probability. The rate can be converted into probability. And my notes has the equation for doing that. So that's not a problem. But at the moment, what we need desperately is a cup of coffee or tea, as the case may be. So period prevalence is mathematically and statistically a funny fellow, okay, because it is a mixture of these two. But what we normally deal with, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, all are point prevalence, computed mathematically at point prevalences. And there are two ways you decide. I'll give an example. I have a friend who was very interested in all this congenital malformation. So he did a study. How many babies are born in CMC hospital with visible congenital abnormalities? So what did he do? From January 1st to 31st December, every day of the year, he had the same routine. He'll go in the morning to the nursery labor room. After lunch, he'll go labor room, nursery. Around supper time, he'll go and visit and see all the babies. Looking for what? Visible congenital abnormal. He saw 50,000 babies. And he found so many number had visible, everything he took, extra fingers, extra toes, doesn't matter. What is it? Is it prevalence or incidence? If it is prevalence, is it point prevalence or period prevalence? Or is it just plain annual incident? Think and answer. Plain. Point prevalence? You have to call either point prevalence or period prevalence. Don't look at me suspiciously. All right. Well.
He counts every prevalence.
Huh? Say it.
See the prevalence for this.
All right. She's hesitating to say point prevalence. She can't see any point in it. That's why. Well, there is a point here. At the point of time is at the time of birth. Okay. So that is not explicitly mentioned. Okay. And remember, there's only one contact with the baby and the investigator. It happened, he did it from January to December. He could have done it for 100 years, it doesn't matter. It's a point prevalence. You understand?
But if we are explaining a specific time, let's say the last one, that event is happening once only, that's fine. But the incidences of the number of cases of birth with it's happening once in that specific period. So why it's not that incidences?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way. If I was really interested in incidence of congenital abnormality among the newborn, I should start at the blastula or morula phase of the embryo. And every Sunday I'll come and look through the ultrasound and say, are you all right? Are you all right? And because all the abortions are all congenital abnormalities. You miss it all, and only the ones who survive up to birth. Remember, incidence times duration is prevalence. Okay, so that is what we didn't remember for when you're arguing. Okay, the fact he did it January to 3rd December, all distractors. And you go to magic show. What do you have? Distraction. The real trick is very simple. So always reduce it to the simple minimum. It is point prevalence, not period prevalence. All right? Any questions? Okay. Now I think you're quite bright. So you can now understand a little more complicated stuff. Have you ever heard of something called survival analysis? And that's one way of calculating what is called as cumulative incidence. Okay? And I'm going to show it just to make sure that you feel you are actually real good in mathematics. Okay? Now, there's a story about the people who underwent surgery, heart surgery, and then we are looking out for one event, reinfarction. After triple bypass surgery, how many would get, what is the chance somebody will develop reinfarction? And I have a figure here called figure 1. Can you see there? This tells the story of 12 patients. The x-axis is calendar years. I've written 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they are actually 2000, 2001, 2002, etc. Calendar years. For example, the first year there were 3 surgeries. Can you see that? Second year, also 3 surgeries. Third year, 3 surgeries. Fourth year, 3 surgeries. Altogether, 12 surgeries. Are you all clear on that? The X indicates reinfarction. Now we are interested in X. The moment we see X, we are not interested in the patient anymore because you are counting reinfarction, incidence of reinfarction. The surgeon now looks at his data because the patient will come and ask, or his son, my father needs a triple bypass surgery. What are your results, sir? Good? Will we survive or will we have a reinfarction within 3 years? How do you answer from that? Because that's what we want in clinical practice, in public health practice. What will happen if some intervention is made 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? Okay? So I'm now hoping I can answer this man, well, if you undergo in my clinic triple bypass surgery, the probability that you will get reinfarction in the first 3 years of life will be so much. Now, how do we do that? And the technique, because you remember, patients actually come and go at different times. So this is the way the data comes to you finally. And how do you make out? Tough. How do you calculate this kind of incidence from this diagram? So what I suggest that you do, don't keep, the circle is death. Circle with the cross inside is death due to reinfarction. That's also an outcome. Here our outcome is always X. Circle, you look at the fellow, number 5. Number 5. Say it again. He did very well. Look at number 7. dirty rascal. After operation, 6 months later, he got a job in Dubai, he went off. No news. So ungrateful fellow, right? Now, we will see in journal, nobody will ever ask you to calculate. Again, you don't need the skills. Somebody else will do for you. But you should know how it works. So you have a feel for how things happen. Okay? Now let us go to figure number 2. This figure number 2 has been created using figure number 1. Did you see that? What is the difference? That's why we are just make one pretension. We are pretending all surgeries happen the same day. Just to make it convenient. So now, this picture tells a better story. How many people got operated? 12. Now look at only at the first year. How many reinfarction? 1. So what is the rate of reinfarction? Or risk of reinfarction? 1 out of 12. Very good. See, so simple. A confusing picture has become very easy. Except for one thing, that number 7. I told you, he's a rascal. Maybe we should ignore the guy completely. We say 1 out of 11. Hey, but he existed. We operated on him. How can you throw away data like that? So, well, up to you. But generally, statisticians are much more respectful about data. They don't throw away data. So what they do is, they say, we won't say it 1 out of 12. That's not correct. 1 out of 11 also is not correct. So the closer to truth is 1 divided by 11.5. How do you like that? Buddha's way, middle path. Now, that is always not correct. Depending on the situation, you have to say which way it should go. But some sort of consensus here, and this is the usual consensus. Now, I'm going to look at the analysis, and you're going to draw with me some columns, okay? I'm sure this is the only time in life you'll ever do a survival analysis, okay? But at least do it once so that I know how to do survival. I'm going to give some notations. This is to take away the fear of seeing any equations and all. Immediately, somewhere in the brain says, sleep, sleep, no? So you get used to seeing this, then you won't feel so bad. I'm going to call the first column J. J is a time factor. Time. J starts with, the first time is starting with 0 to 1, the first year. Second year is 1 to 2. I'm taking that strip of place we call time. So we call jth time. We could either call it J0, J1, J2, or J1, 2, 3, whichever way. So I just put it both together. So you understood which is this J indicates a time slot. And then we get some NJ, number of people entering jth time slot. For example, in our case it is 12, the first lot. Okay, so 12 people got operated all in the same day. It's a lie, but still we go with that lie for the time being. Then ask the question, how many people develop the problem? And I call it IJ, during the ith year incident event, there was 1. Now we have to tackle number 7. You say, how many withdrawals? Wj. That will be 1. Now we recalculate our Nj to accommodate for this withdrawal. I'm going to call him Oj. And you may ask, why is this fellow having all these vague alphabets? It's not mine, because it's conventionally used in most textbooks. So when you see them, you'll have a smile. I know this guy. Okay, Oj. All right, add that. Oj will be equal to, let me write, Oj is equal to, big O and small j, is equal to Wj minus, Nj minus half Wj. Half withdrawal is removed. So I get 11.5. Now I call small rj, risk of reinfarction during the first period of time. And that will be 1 divided by 11.5. Somebody mathematical tune, can you calculate 1 divided by 11.5? .087, and I'm going to calculate small sj, which will be 1 minus rj. In other words, the question is, so many will develop reinfarction, how many will survive without reinfarction? And that will be 0.913. Got it? Now, if you are completely comfortable with this, we have overcome one big hurdle in understanding the whole process of survival analysis. So far, is it clear? I'm going to explain. 12 people entered the first time frame. There was luckily only 1 withdrawal, but there was 1 reinfarction, giving us a rate of a probability of reinfarction at 8.78%. 8.78%. Or in other words, 91.3% survived the first without reinfarction. Clear? Out there in the corner. Comfortable? Yeah. You are surviving. Right. Now, the tough question. How many are there coming into the second year? Obviously, it's not correct answer. I'm not looking at that side. All?
All into the second year, but don't survive.
During the second year in the thing, how many entered the second year? 11. Are you sure? 11.5. See, the artificial half only comes in one place, OJ. Okay? Don't go around calling people half people, okay? How many entered the second year? 11. All right. All right. We'll do the long way. Is the number 1 in?
Yes.
2 in?
Yes.
3 entered?
Yes.
4 entered?
Yes.
5 entered?
Yes.
6 is already at reinfarction. We are not interested in the guy.
That is always
Huh? I told you, we are interested.
first only reinfarction, not the second.
You didn't hear me say that. Yeah. Once you get reinfarction, the person is out. 7 is nowhere in the site. So 10 people.
10, yes.
That's a long way of doing it. But I'll tell you a shorter way of doing it. Okay? The shorter way of doing it is look here. We started with 12. One fellow withdrew. One fellow had the outcome. That must be 10 remaining, right? So confidently you put 10. Now let's have some more confusion. Some more confusion. How many people develop reinfarction during second year?
One.
Good. But how many withdrawals?
That is withdrawal or?
Of course, I can either withdraw to Dubai or to the other world. As far as we are concerned.
So one incident and 3 withdrawals.
Now, madam, are you fixed on the 6th fellow? Ignore him. He is already an infarction. This is called epidemiology by consensus. Okay. If you all agree? Okay, number 3 is a withdrawal. You all agree? Then number 12 is a withdrawal. I can't see any other. 2 only. I see no rebellious hands. Okay. So, 1 and 2, and here what number should I put? 9. 1 out of 9.889. Shall we say it? Like I said the first line. Why don't you tell the second line, the story of second line?
10 entered, 1 incident, and 2 withdrawal, and 9 survived.
Say this. Risk of reinfarction.
Reinfarction is
11.1%.
1%.
Socially more acceptable percentage. 11.1%. And that means
88.9% survived.
88.9% survive. Well, we started with 10 people. That's what he said. 10 people we started, and there's a 1 incident case, 2 withdrawals, and we calculate our rate of event, the risk of reinfarction as 11.1% and survival as 88.9%. Okay, shall we do once more, one more year? Are you there? The third year, how many should be here? Seven, 8, 9. 10 Take the shortcut. One event and 2 withdrawal.
One event.
Now let's fight over the number of withdrawals. Yeah, you're right, 2 events. There are 2 events. Now, I'll stand here till I can hear the correct number.
Half a green person may not be considered as withdrawal.
See, in our Indian movie, it's common to give double role for everybody. Epidemiology, only one role. Number 9 is not a withdrawal. Number 9 is an event. That's okay. Death because of the event. So it's an outcome. Okay, now number 1 and number 9 are events. Now how many withdrawals? 3 withdrawals. Can you calculate 2 divided by 5.5? What is that number? You are very liberal with where you put your decimal, right? Sorry, this one is? You're talking about this?
4.6.
I'm losing you. 7 minus 1.5. Let us ponder about it. 0.36. So the arithmetic you need to do is 2 divided by 5.5. 0.36. Point? 36. Say it loud. Point?
0.36.
All right? All right. So, Mary, tell us the story about this line.
Second year.
Third year.
Third year. After completion of 2 years in second year, the 7 to 8 survived. 7, 8.
How many entered?
Entered 7. The incidence was 2.
There are 2 incident cases
Incidence basis.
and 3 withdrawals.
3. And
The probability of reinfarction was
0.36.
36%.
And 64%
Survive.
In cases of death, why could we consider the period that they contribute within a time span to the demand?
Death due to what? Some other reason. Do you have a reference person number here?
9.
9 is an event. So, he has got full time.
He gets full time.
Full time, not half time. Okay, events get full time. They are the real characters in the whole drama. Okay, we will stop here. Now, listen to carefully. This 91.3% means if you undergo surgery in the first year, at the end of the first year, your chance of survival is 91.3%. What about this? If you survive the first year and then come to the end second year, and there is a chance of 88.9% chance of surviving the second year. If you survive the second year also, you got to be pretty lucky to survive 2 years. And then if you come to the third year, then your chance of survival is 64%. That's kind of not good to say that. You said one number. What is the chance that you'll survive up to the end of third year? That's more decent thing to say, right? This installment survivalship doesn't make out very well. So you'd say, okay, there's a chance of you surviving up to 3 years. Are you with me? So how do you do that? Okay, let's say there is a terrorist. Sure.
Just take the product of those probabilities.
Good. You're right. So what he is suggesting is this. Now, you look at the way. There is a terrorist organization marching through. They're attacked by soldiers. And the terrorists lost 50% of them. And the remaining stood up, started marching in. Another soldier group attacked them, and they lost 50% of that. How many are surviving? How do you do so easily mentally? Very, very good. Exactly what we want to do. To do that, what you did mental calculation, you are saying. We want to calculate what is called as cumulative survival, capital SJ. For the first year, it is 0.913. 913 survived up to the end of first year. Of that, how many survived up to the end of second year? 0.889. 88.9% of 91.3%. Multiply 0.913 into 0.889. And whatever you get here, multiply that with this to get the number here. Do that. This is called cumulative survivorship. This multiply this, what did you get?
0.81.
0.812. Next one is
0.51.
that is your cumulative survivorship. You have a question? All right? Any areas of anxiety? This calculation actually can be written in a form of a equation. This whole thing we did, you know how it looks like, just to see how it looks. The main actor in the whole calculation was this Rj. We calculated each segment of time Rj. And 1 minus Rj gives you Sj. Okay? And then this sign is called pi, J0 to J3. We calculated this. What is this? This is the last multiplication we did. Pi, sigma says add up. Pi say keep multiplying. So this multiplication came up. So that is that part of the equation. Okay, how many years? Up to third year. And now if somebody asks me the question, what is the cumulative risk of disease? Capital Rj would be equal to cumulative incidence is equal to 1 minus this. So that is what we have done. Why am I writing it? Equations look ugly, but actually they are not. They're just written there what we just now did. Okay, take your Rj, find 1 minus Rj, keep multiplying, and 1 minus the cumulative figure gives you the cumulative risk of, and here it will be 0.49. So what is the chance of you have a reinfarction? In 3 years, 49%. That is the question we started with. That's the answer we found. I want to say 3 different things, and listen to this carefully. In these things, I am going to deal with this whole concept of rate and risk, and how in our daily life we sometimes get confused. I have a TB program where I treat tuberculosis patients. Tuberculosis is treated with multiple drugs. And how is it? If you take drugs properly, you can fairly get a good cure rate. But there's always a worry. Have you ever thought of why in the first place the guy got the tuberculosis? That is the worrying thing. Why did he get tuberculosis? And most tuberculosis you get are progressive post-primary or reactivation tuberculosis. That is, as a child you get infected, you manage to fight it and form a Gaunt's complex. Everything is fine, and suddenly it opens up and the fellow starts walking all over. But when you treat the person, you are still worried. What made the bug open up? Something in this defense is not good. You can look for steroid treatment, you can look for HIV infection, but when you find nothing, and very often in India, In my case, most often in Tamil Nadu, used to be low nutrition. And then when you send him out after cure, and the person is getting very poor diet, why should the AFB keep quiet? It'll come up again. Okay, so somewhere we are doing this, what you call sacrament of treating him and things like that, but the fundamental problem why he developed tuberculosis is never taken into consideration. We don't talk about it. The national program we don't discuss. And in fact, I remember many years ago I went with a proposal on looking at nutrition as a method of early healing and also prevention of relapse. Now we know relapse occurs mostly in the first 2 years. It makes sense. In 2 years, if he's able to hold on, after 2 years, he'll be all right. So I'm going to give you data from my hospital. I had 500 patients. And I followed them up for 2 years after treatment. That gave me 1,000 person years. My neighborhood, there's another hospital. They had only 250 patients, but they followed them very carefully for 4 years. They also had 1,000 person years of follow-up. Now, look at the two lines. This is JP, this is other person. Whose relapse rate will be higher, JP's or other person's? Whose relapse rates? Both? Why JP? Huh? I got same person time, 1,000.
We just talk about numbers of relapse over period.
Yes, answer I agree. I'm willing to go with it, but you should tell me why you say that.
Because we have more person years in the first 2 days. In the first case, and the second case, we only half.
That's right. In other words, during the 4 years, the risk is not same. It's high during the first 2 years, low during the second year. You add them up, that is dummy. So very often when you compare hospital, this is what you're faced with. A hospital will give you dummy years and say, I got a low relapse rate. You should ask the question, what is the relapse rate in the first year? What is the relapse rate 2 years in the period after treatment? So the both can measure. So the rate can fool you. For example, if you take 100 women, follow them for 10 years, it is 1,000 women years. 200 women or whatever, you can get it. But the period of follow-up will be increased extremely. For example, you're looking at like fertility. It changes over time. His risk is not same. So that problem comes up with this. Second problem. There are two researchers who went to investigate an epidemic of measles. Now you all know measles? Classically, measles used to come once in 3 years and attack children usually under 5. And the epidemic will last maybe about 2 months maximum. And then it will go. Where it goes, nobody knows. Only to come back after 3 years. So they said it must be a goddess. Okay? No, we won't worry or argue with that. Okay? All I want to do is the story of two researchers. One guy had this 200 children, and he followed up. They were on the spot there, the epidemic going on, and he worked hard, but for eight weeks. And he looked at the epidemic, it was coming, getting infected, and after 8 weeks, it disappeared. He quickly packed his bag and went because he had a girlfriend waiting at home. The other guy was a more meticulous chap. He again followed up the 200 children, but he worked very hard. So what happened? He landed up working for 16 weeks. Of course, after 8 weeks, there were no cases. But he worked anyway, because he was a very conscientious chap. Now, both came with a number of cases divided by number of child weeks. Who had more child weeks? He had more child. This one, less child weeks. So, who had a higher rate? He had a lower rate. Which would you trust? The one with a girlfriend or one without a girlfriend?
First.
Why do you make that? You don't like girlfriends. No, I mean, what are you against him? Why?
No, because the risk is for 2 months.
Yeah, risk is whether versus the additional 8 weeks.
Yeah.
That's okay. So what? No, Indian Penal Code doesn't say that you can't follow up more time.
No, but the risk is lower as compared to first 8 weeks. That's right.
You're right. Somehow the second fellow wasted time, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. But what is the problem here? What? Because this happens all the time. You can't dictate everything. One fellow will do a study and come and publish and tell you, this, I followed up by 16 weeks, I did a better job. You have to give credit for him also. So how would you tackle the problem? The problem is simple enough because they both shows the wrong parameter. This is exactly a case where a person time should not be used. Why then? Because here is a disease which has got a time frame of action. It lasts for 2 months and goes away. In such situation, never use person time. There you only talk about risk of measles. Ask the question, during the epidemic period, what proportion got the measles, and only calculate risk and never calculate person time. I told you about tuberculosis. Varying risk time creates confusion with person time. Now I am talking about even more. The disease itself is bound by certain time frame. Both chronic disease, epidemic diseases and non. For example, there's a condition called congenital pyloric stenosis. Who has done some surgery here? You are the youngest from the medical school now, here? No.
I start MD school next year.
Oh, okay. So that is a different kind of internship you're talking about. Congenital pyloric stenosis. Have you seen the case? Anybody? Well, enough to say, babies get it in the newborn, in the early infancy. That's it. After 1 year, they never get it. In such cases, don't use person time. Use the risk of. So the choice of the parameter has to be thought of in every case and ask the question, should I follow the rate calculation or should I ask the risk calculation? Because obviously I can't prepare for every eventuality, but some guess you can make. If there are fluctuating rate, be very careful that because in each time frame it is changing, watch it. If something goes up and comes down in a period of time, never use rate. Risk is the correct way to do. But if you calculate rate and land up with the rate something like 0.001, 1 per thousand. This is the rate of breast cancer in Indian women. Okay? Calculated using percentile. Actually, what I've done is taken the rate of 1 per thousand women years. But nobody's interested. Ideally, you should convert into a risk statement. What is 10-year risk or lifetime risk pregnant? Okay? In that calculation, you can convert it. Your equation is there. If you want, I can write it. It's equal to 1 minus e to the power of IT. And why I is the incidence, T is the time. Okay? And E to the power of minus IT. This is the equation that gives you that. Don't worry, this is not important for us, but it gives you ability to accumulate any rate into time frame and give you risk statement.